how their job has changed over the years, from simply advising people how to prepare for jobs to going to meeting some of their emotional needs. And we'll continue that discussion. Not aware of any particular legislation moving forward right now in that area, but we are aware.
I'd only add, we're also redesigning the way we deliver mental health services in the state of Iowa. There are a number of things going on that front. We used to deliver them all by a county system. Some counties had lots of services, some counties had very few services. We're working to equalize that across the state and get a base level of services in every county in the state of Iowa. That's for indigent patients. I also think we're certainly looking at a bullying bill this session. That is something that more and more you see how social media is being used, and that kids get into bullying on social media, and kids commit suicide and that kind of stuff. We're trying to work with local school districts to develop a plan to fight bullying in the state, which is a big share of why we have so many mental health problems in K through 12 education.
If we don't address it at the early age, and it just gets worse as they get older, and so it's something we need to deal with.
Mitch, could you repeat the question?
Question is, given the ever more changing emotional needs of our children in Iowa, how do you see us best addressing their health through greater funding in schools, stronger partnerships with agencies, or something else entirely?
Well, my colleagues have stated a lot of what is going on. We are moving forward a bullying bill that the governor is very strongly, it's another one of his signature pieces of his agenda, because bullying has changed over the last 50 years. 50 years, you might have seen a bully on the playground or on the bus ride home, but now because of technology and because of access that our students have to that, bullying and harassment and the isolation that can come with that can happen 24 hours, 24/7. And so that bullying bill is moving forward. And as Representative Forrestal mentioned, we have been discussing the changing role of school counselors and the fact that their jobs and their responsibilities are changing. So I think a lot of the points have been touched by my colleagues, but it's an issue that we continue to look at and know that there's a need.
Do you have a follow-up question, Troy?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Our next question comes from Naomi Leinen regarding Common Core. What happened to Brad Zahn's Stop Common Core bill in subcommittee?
It got stopped in subcommittee. There's been some discussion about Common Core in the state of Iowa, and some people, I don't know, see boogeymen in it or something. I think we're giving up Iowa's right to set standards. We're not. So there's been some conversation about that. So Brad Zahn put in a bill to say we're going to get rid of Common Core. Common Core was put together. It was initiated first in Iowa. We were one of the first few states to start initiating this. And it's about working with the business community and asking them, what are the skills that are important for kids to graduate from high school with? That's what Common Core is about. It's about a partnership between educators and the world that needs trained workers. And so that's all the Common Core was about. There are some concerns that it leaves some things out. It's focused right now on math and reading, and it doesn't necessarily get into all of the other things like art and music and all kinds of other areas. But Common Core is a good system for states to take a look at and talk with their business community and interact with them and figure out what is important skills for kids to have as they come out of high school. So some people think it's some crazy thing, the world's taking, the UN's taking over. All of that is kind of tinfoil hat stuff, okay? Common Core is really about working with the business community and getting the skills the kids need for modern jobs.
I can't comment on Senator Zahn's bill, but I can tell you that there are 5 bills in the House dealing with Common Core. I'm serving on 2 of the subcommittees. we have to remember that anything that passes out of Iowa legislature and becomes law has to be bipartisan. So we are actually, there is one bill in the House that we are working in a bipartisan manner. We want to write the bill in such a way that people are assured that local school districts still have control over the books they use, they have control over the lesson plans and things like that. And you know, maybe change some of the language that is complex and mystifying so that people are assured that there's still local, a great degree of local control in the schools. I'm not interested in beating my head against the wall on bills that have no chance of becoming law. I'm looking at finding a way to have a bipartisan bill, and we'll be talking to Senator Cornbott, the House chair, to see what he thinks he can get through the Senate in that regard. And we hope to diffuse some of this situation, because there are a lot of things, there's a lot of ideas floating out there that really mischaracterize Common Core. There are some shortcomings there, but I think that we need to just make sure that there are ways to address that, so that the public has a way to comment on it, so that and we can modify area. We have 30% of the Common Core that we can modify. So there are ways that we can work with it and make it a valuable tool, and we'll continue to do that in a bipartisan manner, which is the only way we can do that at the present time.
Well, I'm sorry.
I've had a number of constituents come to me that are concerned about the Common Core, and I have some concerns as well. And I'd like to actually sit down with some educators and talk to them about it, get some more information about it. But I'm anxious to see and read Greg's bill that he's talking about. Hopefully that will address some of those concerns, but we'll have to wait and see.
Iowa has a long-standing tradition of local control of its schools, and the Iowa Core sets standards for some subjects, but it allows the curriculum to be developed by local school districts, the choices of textbooks, the lesson plans, et cetera, et cetera. And so that isn't something that we as legislators want to take away from local school boards, from parents, from local citizens. And the Common Core or Iowa Core, because of that local piece in there, was developed because across the country we saw a need. We saw that our students were not measuring up to those of their counterparts in across the world, and that we needed to address this. And so it was an attempt to try to set some common standards by which our students across the country that we could count upon the students across the country learning certain core subjects and core matter to make them successful, to give them a heads up and make them competitive in an increasingly global society. And so certainly we will look on these bills. There are, I think, 2 more bills that are coming up for subcommittee this coming week, and we will certainly look at those and see what see if there are some changes that need to be made to Iowa Core. But at its heart, it is an attempt to try to turn around the situation of our students falling short in some cases of the standards and their performance. So all of us in this room, I think, want the best educational experience that we can get for our students. We want them to be successful. We want them to be players on the world market, and so that's where this attempt is coming from.
You have a follow-up question? Okay. Our next question comes from Brian Jack Holder regarding medical marijuana. Why should the state of Iowa continue to deprive adult law-abiding citizens the freedom to medical marijuana?
Let me comment, because Jeff Jorgensen wrote a letter, imputed some thoughts to me. Look up in the dictionary the word lead and mislead. His was mislead. He asked a question about legalizing marijuana in the state. That was his question. We all said no. He didn't ask a question about medical marijuana, but then he put in a letter to the editor that suggested somehow by extension that we had all said we're all against medical marijuana, which we may or may not be, I don't know. But let me say this first about medical marijuana. It is possible that this legislature will pass it, not this one, this year, that a legislature will pass it at some point in the future. And, by the way, Jeff, if you have ever been with a chemo patient, puking their guts out, and they couldn't afford the $1,000 a pill to deal with that, you might have a different attitude. Hey, you don't have the floor, sir. I do. Okay? So he writes this letter and basically says, I'm against medical marijuana. So now I got to explain to everybody that I'm not necessarily against medical marijuana. Here's the reality. Some states have done it in such a way where you can get medical marijuana for any reason. Iowa will never do that. That will not happen in the state of Iowa. By the way, his letter also suggested that Colorado legalized it through the legislature and the Democratic governor. The truth is, it was a vote of the people that legalized marijuana, period. Not the legislature, it was a vote of the people. So apparently Jeff's against that. But then he also tries to play the game of guilt by association. So he mentions Joe Bolcom in the legislature. He's from Iowa City, and he's a proponent of both legal marijuana for anybody and also of medical marijuana. And he says by implication, therefore, that he doesn't really believe me. So in his letter, he essentially calls me a liar. Okay? So let me just say this. I've seen him say nice things about Ron Paul. So apparently Jeff Jorgensen is for heroin and legalized prostitution. Because Ron Paul has talked about both of those. So I don't know if you're addicted, Jeff. I don't know if you use heroin. I don't know if you use prostitutes. But you did basically say, somehow I was guilty because of what one of my colleagues proposed. So if guilt by association works on me, it can work on you too, Jeff. I don't think so. You can come up and talk to me afterwards.
Could you read the question again?
Why should the state of Iowa continue to deprive adult law-abiding citizens of the freedom to medical marijuana?
If Iowa ever allows medical marijuana, it will be under very strict conditions. And I've heard Senator Grunstall answer that question before, and I think that we're in substantial agreement. If there is a medication that has a legitimate use for people, I think it should be. But I don't know if smoking marijuana is the best way to deliver that drug or not. There are numerous ways of doing that. But, you know, we have a lot of dangerous drugs that are legal. We have opiates that are legal for certain purposes. You know, 2 weeks ago I was on crutches, and I had a prescription for a pain medication that, and it was helpful. So I think we need to have some compassion once in a while. I don't foresee that we're going to do medical marijuana in the near future. We'll continue to watch what happens in other states. And if it ever becomes legal in Iowa, it will be very much controlled and used in an appropriate manner.
On the surface, I don't support legalizing medical marijuana. I haven't been convinced that we should.
Well, I think there are mixed reviews out there as to whether marijuana actually is helpful to cancer patients and other patients who might find relief from it. There are certainly testimonies that swear by it and say that it's very helpful when nothing else is helpful. I also know that the opposite is true. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a cancer survivor who actually happens to live in Colorado, and said that she was given, during her chemo, was given medical marijuana, and it did nothing to relieve her symptoms of endless nausea. So I think before our state would ever take this step, very, very thoughtful consideration needs to go into this, very careful writing of any kind of legislation, very strict controls would need to be put in place before this would ever be considered.
Just to give you an example of inappropriate law, Representative Bottler went to California and walked into a clinic and was written a prescription for medical marijuana for hemorrhoids that he doesn't have. So clearly the California law is not appropriate.
Brian, do you have a follow-up question?
I just had a statement, so I don't have to go up to Des Moines and testify.
Well, statements are for afterwards.
Okay.
For now.
Would you consider prohibiting alcohol and tobacco if you're going to continue to outlaw medical marijuana? And why do you get to make a policy determination of one drug over another? Why do you get to choose?
You asked the question, and I gave you the answer.
Because you have the power.
You asked if I
And legitimately, because some people see abuse of drugs. We're going to be very careful about what we do on that front. That's why the legislature has the power the legislature and the governor together have to pass laws and decide which drugs may in fact be safe and have a purpose that is useful. And nausea for many chemotherapy patients is a useful use. There are also kids that have multiple seizures every day, 30 or 40 seizures every single day, and some level of THC reduces the level of those seizures. There are people with epilepsy, there are people with MS, multiple sclerosis, and it helps calm the tremors that are in there that make it difficult for them to walk or even feed themselves. So it does have some uses, and Greg's right. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a very limited way. It's not going to be every doctor can write prescriptions for any reason or for no reason. That's not going to happen.
Okay, our next question comes from Tim Rohr regarding foreign language. I understand there was a House subcommittee hearing this week on teaching a foreign language in elementary schools. What happened at that subcommittee hearing? And do you think teaching a foreign language in elementary schools will eventually occur?
That subcommittee was chaired by Representative Joel Fry. I know it occurred on Thursday morning. I am not sure whether that bill was passed. I was not part of the subcommittee. I'm not sure whether that bill was passed out of subcommittee or not. But at this point, it is an unfunded mandate for our schools. It's not a bad idea. I know that there's a lot of knowledge out there or studies out there that show that children who learn a foreign language at a very young age pick it up much more readily than some of us who are a little older. And certainly, again, as I referenced, the global economy that we live in certainly is a valuable thing. I think adults right now who are bilingual or have many know at least another language besides their native are very marketable, make themselves very marketable for having that extra skill. So it is not a bad idea at this point. It would be an unfunded mandate. As Senator Gronsfeld mentioned earlier, we made quite a few commitments to education, heavy dollar commitments to education last year. So I don't think this year probably that bill will see the funding that we would want to see go with it in order to not make it an unfunded mandate for our schools at this time.
You know, one of the most difficult foreign languages to learn is English. And I found, when you study a foreign language, and you study the structure and the grammar of the language, it helps you understand English better. But so I think it'd be great, for children to learn some foreign language. But at this time, we're not going to do an unfunded mandate.
Here's an interesting situation. Utah has about 25% of all of the Chinese language learners in the country. Utah, the state of Utah, because their governor left the governorship and went to become the ambassador to China, and saw 3-4 billion people in China and said, this is a pure trading partner that's really important. Most of the research suggests it's a little easier to learn languages earlier, and that in fact would make sense. And so I think, it's fascinating what happens in education. Anybody know? So we've always done things this way, right? I always tell people at orientation in the legislature, first-time legislators, that there's two things you'll hear that aren't true, but people will repeat them often. One is, we've never done it that way, and the other is, we've always done it that way. Okay, so there are things in education where you start to wonder, why do we wait until middle school or high school with kids? This is according to my daughter, who could be wrong. She's never told me that, but she could be wrong. So why do they teach science, the 3 subjects of science, in the order they teach them? Biology, chemistry, physics? Because it makes sense? No, it was alphabetical. Biology, chemistry, physics. So I think it's good for people to take a look at how we teach, what makes the most sense to teach. We're seeing it more in the state now because kids, a lot more kids are coming from multilingual families, and we're finding out, wow, they master 2 languages really well when they're doing it in early elementary or even before they get to school. They learn languages really well. So I think that's something we ought to think about, what works best in terms of kids being able to learn a foreign language. And then when you think about the governor of Utah, who became the ambassador to China, saying, we're going to do Chinese in this state because we see gigantic trading partners over there, and it's about time we have some group of kids that actually know how to speak their language.
I wish I'd taken a foreign language in school. I didn't. I admire people that have the fluency in the second language. Although I think we need to focus on reading, writing, and math. When the students excel at that, then yeah, we need to start adding to their day. But I think we need to focus on that first.
Okay. The next question comes from Charlie Johnson regarding Greyhound racing. What is your position in limiting Greyhound racing?
There was a subcommittee on Thursday, my days are getting mixed up, Thursday morning, through the state government, House State Government Committee. I'm not on that committee, I was not on that subcommittee, but I did attend the subcommittee to discuss a proposal to end the practice of live Greyhound racing. Currently in the state of Iowa, racing takes place at 2 tracks, Bluffs Run here in Council Bluffs, and at the Dubuque track at the Mystique Casino track in Dubuque. And the proposal that was voted out of the subcommittee unanimously with bipartisan support was a proposal to offer $70 million as sort of a soft landing for Greyhound owners and breeders, those who have kennels in the state of Iowa, so that if the practice of Greyhound racing is ended, it's not a thud, but it's more of a soft landing. So that bill will, I believe that bill is going to be run out of the state government committee this week to preserve it, make it funnel proof. But I do support the end of dog racing, certainly for the community of Council Bluffs. eliminating the dog racing, which is it's a declining interest. People's choices in entertainment change over years, and while when Bluffs Run first came into Council Bluffs, it was very popular and the stands were full all the time. That market of individuals who are patrons of the dog racing has dwindled by more than 95%. And so now with a grandstand that holds somewhere around 2,500 people in Council Bluffs on any given night, you'll see maybe 30 or 40 people there. And I've been there. It actually sits in my district. I've been there any number of times, and a lot of those folks who are there actually doing simulcast horse racing, or betting on simulcast horses. So it is an industry that just is not attracting the customers anymore. That area of Council Bluffs is an area that could